What's going on, guys? John out here with you for Death Stranding PlayStation 4 exclusive review. Now, as a lot of you know, this is a game that has been very hit and miss in regards to reviews. Some people want to give it perfect 10s. Some people will go out there and give it some zeros. It's been all over the place. I'm going to do my best in this review. It's going to be a little longer, but I'm going to do my best to uncover the good, the bad, and talk about everything in between. Not just the game, but the industry as well, and some of the other things going forward. So I want to try to do this as a kind of a social commentary and see what you think out of it. And whether you love it, you hate it, I want to know your comments and thoughts below. So, Kojima Productions, now Hideo Kojima, I think not even in his, 50s yet, I don't even believe. This dude has had success at a very early age in his professional career, and now he's finally had the opportunity to step away from Konami and create a game that he's always wanted. And in my humble opinion, that is one that's going to be a beautiful painting, the one that's going to have incredible voice acting, and try to display and have an art style unlike anything ever seen in a video game. But a lot of us, as we talked about, and even when I talk about games that David Cage has made, whether it be Heavy Rain or Detroit Become Human, you often wonder what makes a video game, or what is a video game anyway. And Death Stranding is one of those that also leaves questions in that regard. Yes, Hideo Kojima is creating art for sure, but at what cost? Is the game fun to play? It seems like Death Stranding is a culmination for his love and expression, but can that work to make a game? So, as we all know, again, this is Kojima's first step away from Konami. He's gone from making the Metal Gear franchise, Metal Gear Solid, now stepping into Death Stranding. How is that going to work? Now, Kojima himself has enveloped an all-star cast to go within this game, whether it be Norman Reedus from The Walking Dead as Sam. You got Troy Baker, that's done a lot of stuff with Metal Gear and just a ton of stuff as far as video game commentary is concerned. Whether if you want to even talk about Troy Baker being Joel from The Last of Us, dude has very high caliber voice work. You have Lindsay Wagner, you have Margaret Qualley, you have Tommy Earl Jones that gives an exceptional performance as Die Hardman in this game, and Mads Mikkelsen. It's incredible here. And then you even have, work from Guillermo del Toro, Jeff Keighley, and Conan O'Brien. So this is one of those things where Kojima, again, I believe, with the unlimited money that he has at his disposal, he is able to even bring all of his friends in here to try to incorporate them in a game that has never been seen before. So what we know is, from what I'm going to give the plot so far, I'm not going to give a lot of spoilers and anything in here, because just in case you want to experience the game from the very beginning, listening to this review is not going to change much. That's not going to take away from it. So playing as Sam, who is Norman Reedus, you will spend, especially going in through, I'll say chapter 1 to chapter 3, there's about 18 chapters in this game, and some of them range to being hours long, and some of them range to being maybe 15-20 minutes. But within chapter 1 to 3, as I was first doing this mock script, you're going to spend 95% of the game delivering packages and putting this America in here on the chiral network. And what the chiral network basically is just an entire internet landscape to keep America connected and attempt to make it whole, to make it where all of the product and everything else can flow through and people can stay doing what they're supposed to be doing. Now, there are a few terms in here as far as timefall. All that really is rain showers in this game, but it's kind of like acidic rain, that if it comes contact with the human skin, it will allow it to age at a astronomical rate. And anything that comes in contact as far as, building and networking throughout the game, the structures and everything else can just be absolutely torn away with the acidic rain and the stuff that's going on there. But basically, in Death Stranding, you're going to be coming in contact with what is known as BTs, beached things, that threaten to destroy the city. Thankfully, Sam, playing as Norman Reedus, is a repatriate with an ability to come back to life whether anything happens to him. But his attempt at the very beginning of the game, as you know, is to make America whole again. So, from all of that, that's pretty much what you have throughout the first 3 chapters. You're going to be going from place to place, most likely on foot. 90% of the time in this game, not even just through chapter 3, you're going to be going through on foot, delivering packages, using the triggers L2 and R2 to keep yourself upright and maintaining your stamina and figuring out what supplies to bring with you. That is what you're going to be doing throughout this game. And if that doesn't sound very fun, let me tell you, it's not. So, when we're going through this game, Kojima wants to bring about having something that is a lot of just artistic style, make you say awe as far as landscapes. But as I'm playing this game and I'm going through some of the rain showers, you see some of the rocks and things in the mountains, it's not very pleasant to look at all the time, especially when the weather is in effect. So you're just going to see things that are muddy. You're going to be tripping over big-ass rocks. If you don't bring ladders with you to climb through parts of the mountains, if you don't bring climbing anchors to climb through parts of the mountains, basically you're going to be fucked. And you don't have a chance to come through anything. But the one thing that is important in this game is being able to come together and play online. Now, if you're familiar with Dark Souls, Demon Souls, games like that, with the exception that you're not going to be able to get invaded, you will be playing alongside, and as you connect a spot to the network, when you deliver a package, someone will say, hey, connect me to the network now. And most of the time, when you get a chance to connect to the network, you will see the structures that come across on screen that is left by some of the other players, which whether it would be bridges to cross through vehicles, whether it'll be post boxes so you can drop off some of the lost cargo that you see throughout the way. You can build safe houses so you have a place to sleep throughout your long journey. You can build watchtowers so you can go over and look and see what items may have been dropped so you can help other players pick them up. You can also build generators. As you see, I'm on a trike here, that if you go up to the generator, it will recharge the battery of the vehicles that you use. So as more players begin to play Death Stranding, and depending on where you're at in the game, once you activate certain areas and put them on the network, there will be things left over that can help you from other players. Or if you go in and you get an item called the PCC, that allows you to build several structures to be able to use. And granted, you can't build them on top of each other, and also granted, you need the materials to be able to build them. But you see here, as I'm going over a bridge, this was laid down by another player, which helps me cross with the vehicles especially, because if you do not use vehicles on flat land, and as you'll see throughout my gameplay, the tiniest of rocks will fuck up any attempt that you have as far as driving. You'll get bounced all over the place, whether it be something you feel like you should easily be able to scale, just like that one there. You cannot. If you're not driving a vehicle on a flat surface, you're going to have one hell of a time getting from point A to point B. So, I want to talk about something that is often a discussion in a lot of these types of games that I end up playing that is just not gameplay heavy. And whether or not you agree with this or whether or not you disagree, that's okay. You can leave comments below. I want to get this out as Death Stranding not only for a review but also being a social commentary. So what I believe Death Stranding is losing sight. I personally believe that the top priority of a video game is to engage the player with an experience. And that should be the first priority. And you say that Death Stranding does engage you with an experience as far as the storyline. And I can understand that. As far as Mads Mikkelsen, Lindsay Wagner, and Troy Baker and all those guys, the story is pretty good when it comes from Sam and the things that you delve into. But I won't go too deep into that. But if you talk about that, the other element of ammunition that I bring to the table is, what good is a game if it's not fun to play? If I have to delve through the first 3 chapters of the game, whether it be between, I would say 13 to 15 hours between the first 3 chapters, and maybe 11 of those are not cutscenes, and maybe about 10 of that is just not fun to play because you're going from A to B, basically walking, tripping over things if you're not taking care. You have to make sure you bring the equipment with you. You have to make sure that when you go into the menus, as you see, when you're having your cargo, you can only carry a certain amount of weight, and you can only carry a certain amount of things in your back. Thankfully, you can press the triangle button on the PlayStation 4 controller to manage that, so it puts it, on the equipment rack, the tool rack, stuff on the sides, so it kind of manages it where you're not carrying all of your stuff on your back. But that's what you're doing. You're pretty much playing a UPS simulator, a FedEx simulator, a walking simulator. A walking simulator is what I like to call my cerebral palsy that I deal with every day. I'm always living in a walking simulator. Do I want to play those type of games all the time and not get the type of experience that I want having fun gameplay? Yes, I understand again that Death Stranding, as it seems to be, is a beautiful painting. But it tries to blur the lines of what a game is really. And yeah, he's creating art, but if it's not fun to play, if you have to eat some rotten parts of a hamburger or rotten parts of a chicken or undercook things in order to get to the something that's beautiful in the middle, is that really worth it? Is it really worth getting your stomach pumped? Is it really worth going through the torture and all of that? What I loved about the Metal Gear Solid franchise, and everybody talks about the Kojima-isms that are in the game, that he loves to make the story and fabricate it into something else, but I thought at the very beginning especially, even playing Metal Gear Solid going into Metal Gear Solid 2, I went from 1, 2, and 4. I didn't get to play a lot of 3, but I beat 1, 2, and 4 throughout the series. I always thought, yes, there was a lot of voice acting, there was a lot of commentary, there was some other things going on, but at the heart of Metal Gear Solid especially, gameplay was fun, and anytime I got into a battle with a boss, whether it be the Vulcan, whether it be the Laughing Ravens and stuff from MGS4, whether it be running naked with Raiden in Metal Gear Solid 2, fighting sword battles with Solidus Snake, anytime I got into a boss fight, anytime I got into a skirmish, whether it would be action or stealth, I always enjoyed playing the game. And I thought that within that branch that Konami had and Kojima had with Metal Gear Solid, it was a good blend. Even though there was a lot of story from Kojima coming in there, there was a lot of good blend as far as the action sequences were concerned. And yes, there was a lot of story, but it wasn't enough to detract from the main experience, the main event, which I thought was the boss battles and the action and everything else. I never thought that Kojima, in making those games, even though they're not for everyone, I never thought that it lost sight of what the game needed to star and needed to be, and that was more of the gameplay sequences that made it fun. But as I played Death Stranding, and yes, I've played it all the way through, it took me about 65 hours to get through. It's not a short game. As far as most of it, like I said, you're going to be walking from point A to point B, and thankfully as the game opens up, you'll get trucks and other vehicles and things like that, but basically you're going to be transversing from A to B and trying to get there safely, and that's what you're going to be doing. But if you're expecting this game to open up to be Metal Gear Solid, to open up to have a ton of action, you're going to be sorely disappointing. And in Death Stranding, I thought the largest problem with the game, as I said, that's basically what you're doing. And the fun is pretty much sapped out of the way. And I think that's a big problem. So as I mentioned earlier, within the first 3 chapters of the game, the story moves at a snail's pace. And even with the Kojima rhetoric and the make-believe words and the dialogue and the theme of the game and everything else in there, even though the story will move at a snail's pace, as far as some of this, I can say, as a whole, this story's probably a little bit simpler to understand, and I think the main message that I want to drive home, and I believe that the creators of the game wanted to drive home, Kojima and all the actors and everything else, as you see Conan O'Brien there in a cameo, says the people of the world need to wake up and start working together, because if we do that, if we cooperate, the world's going to be a much better place to live. We can find peace and happiness this way. I think that that's the main message of this game. But I do wonder, as Kojima has his own studio and is making this game and taking out more of an art project as far as more of an art than an action sequence game, is this the future of what gameplay is going to be? Because if Death Stranding is the best UPS simulator, best FedEx simulator, best walking simulator that we can have on the market, and might still have on the market within the next 10 years, if this is the best we can do, and other gameplay developers try to go and take that same route, I'm going to be pretty goddamn scared. I'll be honest with you on that. This is a very crazy article that I saw throughout this game, but this might also be a commentary as far as going to what could be in the future. An asexual world. Forget about, having sex as a boyfriend, girlfriend, lesbian, gay, anything else like that. You don't want to have it, and you don't need to have it. That makes me wonder, let's bring together the world through the internet, but nothing else. So, that was one of the interesting articles in the game that I had found. But as I thought, better suited as a movie. In my honest opinion, I think Kojima did feel stunted in his personal growth by Konami. I thought maybe, as I played throughout this game, and even though Konami is a really shitty company as far as they treated their workers, making them work long hours, making them not be able to see their family, not giving them the wages that they need, and things like that. We all know that. There was the hashtag Fuck Konami that's been going around. And especially with the Contra games that got screwed up in the Castlevania franchise and, Silent Hill, all these things being turned into pachinko machines. A lot of people don't want Konami to be able to do what they want to do. They wanted to see what would happen with Kojima, and they were very excited in terms of what this game could do. But it makes me wonder, was Konami one of the ones that saved Kojima from going off the deep end as far as making a game like this? Yes, it's an artistic expression, but I do feel, in my personal opinion, this game is more of a commentary for Kojima as far as what he's gone through as a game designer. I think maybe he felt stunted, like I said, through Konami. This was his ups and downs through Death Stranding, making the long journeys, getting everything together, getting it connected. That was his journey through making his own studio, going through all those changes, trying to get everything connected, going through the ups and downs of making his own studio, risking of losing it all as far as everything that he's done through Metal Gear, trying to branch out and do something else. I thought that was an analogy that you can use in this game. As a reference of delivering packages, performing hard manual labor, going through the grind, pouring his heart and soul into it. That was all the things that Kojima had to do to be able to build this new studio, to make Kojima Productions. I thought this game, in a sense, as I was playing it, was more of a microcosm of what Kojima had to go through to be able to make his own studio and get through this own part of his experience to get to this next point into his life. Now, interestingly enough, I want to talk about a couple controversies in this game as well. I might get a little more gameplay in here as I'm going to see how far this commentary goes, and I'll try to add some stuff in here as we go. But I want to talk about it. As I mentioned, all the stuff that I just talked about with Death Stranding and the personal struggle, I do think that could have made a great movie. I do think if Kojima wants to take this next step, now that Guillermo del Toro is one of his friends and all of that, he could go into be a fantastic art director, Kojima. I can see that, especially coming through Death Stranding. It would make a lot of sense to take this game, to have it. You could turn it into direct animation. You can do a lot of the same things. It would make an interesting watch, and I think this game would have been suited as that better. But we'll see how that goes. This was a very bizarre article that I want to talk about too here with Polygon, in a connection between Hideo Kojima and Adam Sandler. Now this one is very freaking bizarre, but I want to talk about it really quickly. It said, linking the two articles, this author here thought that Hideo Kojima and Adam Sandler are extremely smart and they have tasted success early on. Whether or not you like all of Kojima's games and whether or not you like all of Adam Sandler's movies, you do like Happy Gilmore and Billy Madison, but you want to stay the fuck away from Jack and Jill. I understand all of that. Maybe Death Stranding is the Jack and Jill for Hideo Kojima. But in this connection, He says both of these two have brought their friends in their own projects, whether it be Rob Schneider, a lot of these other guys in here, Farley from Saturday Night Live, making some stuff in Grandma's Boy, bringing some of that stuff in there from Sandler. Both are truly free to explore their own world because their pocketbooks are endless. I thought that was a very interesting connection, albeit maybe a little bit of a stretch. But in this sense, as we talked about with Death Stranding, I thought the open pocketbook allowed Kojima to create a game like this. He pretty much had the backing from Sony to be able to do whatever the hell he wanted. And thankfully, and ironically, Adam Sandler's had that same ability to do those same things. Some of those movies have completely flopped, but he's one of the nice guys that you have in the industry as far as making movies. He wants to involve his friends. He wants to get a chance to do whatever he's freely involved in. I think it's really interesting. And whether or not you want to take much stock in it, I thought it was interesting to bring up. What do you think about it? We talked about it as far as the future of gaming. The ultimate question. What is Death Stranding really? Do you perceive this to be a future in gaming? As we talk about the Xbox Scarlet, the PlayStation 5, some of the stuff that's on the horizon, we all know that as these games go along, they're going to get hyper-realistic as far as the graphics. And you're already getting the induction, whether it be the Oculus Rift or the PSVR or some of those other things that you can get on cell phones now, that you can delve into virtual reality, you can delve into some artistic experiences. I know you had Dear Esther, but that was, much shorter as far as you were the main cutscene, you were the point of the game, and it was really only a 3 to 4 hour game. It was a lot shorter. It wasn't about 65 hours like Death Stranding is. But do you believe this is going to be the future of gaming? Do you really want, if people don't like Walking Simulator, I'm sorry, that's basically what this game is. But I do believe, I will say this to you in wholeheartedness, if you finish Death Stranding, and I don't give two shits as much as how much of the side quests that you do, but I honestly believe that if you finish Death Stranding, you should be able to get a certificate from Kojima Productions itself that automatically qualifies you as a 100% unadulterated UPX or FedEx delivery system. You can get a full-time job. Screw college educations. Screw any of that stuff. You will be guaranteed a full-time job until you are dead if you finish Death Stranding. We should get that on a petition on change.org, because that's basically what you're going to be doing in this game. And the one thing I always hear from people as I've gone through a lot of reviews and things in this game, they mention to me that you have to be in the right mood to play this game. You're not maybe going to want to play it every day, but if you go through some of this shit, if you go through some of the boring tedium, you can find a little bit of the stuff that you want to be able to persevere. Because getting through all the boredom and tedium, that's important to getting through any other ending of a game and seeing it through. That's not what I want to hear when I'm playing a AAA title such as Death Stranding and Hideo Kojima, because I know that he can do better than this. I know as far as a artistic direction and voice acting and story, especially voice acting in this game is a freaking 15 out of 10. That Tommy Earl Jenkins is Die Hard, man, and I can't show you the scene in the game, but you can see a lot of those spoilers if you go in there online and look at it, is absolutely Emmy Oscar worthy. The dude is freaking fantastic. A lot of the voice actors that they put in this game are absolutely fantastic. But that is only one element of the game. That is not gameplay. That is not going around being able to use vehicles and other weapons and stuff like this. Now this segment that you see right here, in the first part of it, especially through Chapter 4, this is a little later in the game, maybe like 9 or 10 here, but this is one of those elements, yeah, if you thought it was fun, having assault rifles and shotguns and handguns, rocket launchers and stuff like that, yeah, you probably say that it would be, because this is one of your only instances in the game, besides for a few handful of boss fights, that you're actually going to be able to have action. But unfortunately, even for this part in this game that you're going up against in these war zones are repeated 4 times in the game. So even this stuff can get a little bit repetitive. You might not think so because a lot of the game is stemmed from walking, but even this part of the game can get a little bit of repetitive, and that's really annoying. So there's a few other things that I want to talk about in some of these other controversies, so this will be a little bit longer and I'll put more gameplay in there. So we talked about the future of gaming, and I want to mention this again. I know I mentioned this a few other times as far as what is fun really. I can never tell anyone what fun is because it is subjective. Everyone does have their own taste. But thankfully, all of us, when we're playing these games, we have to know what gaming is. Gaming is not a fucking art show. And that's basically what Death Stranding is. This is something that you can put in a Chicago theater, in a museum. You show them this. This is something that is, being breathed to life. I saw the National Geographic Museum while I was in Vegas. That did not make for a fantastic video game. I did enjoy looking at the art, but that's all it was. And again, in Death Stranding, I don't want to see all of those ideals in its core taking gameplay away, because taking gameplay away and drawing an experience there for the player is the sole reason why we play fucking video games to begin with, isn't it? That's the sole reason why you want to put the controller in your hand and get immersed. Yes, you have story elements that keep you tied, but it's the core gameplay, especially for some of these bad games that are in here, and I guess you can qualify Death Stranding as a bad game because it's not really a game. But it's one of those things that keeps the players coming back if the gameplay is good. And there isn't any to speak of in Death Stranding. So, the main selling point of the game for a bit could be scenery. But as I mentioned, even going through, do you want to skip all of these cutscenes? As you see Norman Reedus taking a shower, I have to skip all of these. You have this Monster Energy stuff that's in there. I don't know if you want to talk about it as a social commentary or a satire, but you basically have bombardments of Monster Energy advertising, as you have to suck down 3 of those to get your stamina filled. You have to go through 4 different cutscenes of taking a shower and skip all of those. You have to take your piss and shit your piss and shit when you don't have weapons to go through these BTs and throw them at them, because at the very beginning of the game you have nothing to defend yourself with. You're taking all of this monotonous experience and having to go through and try to get through to find the fun in this game. So as I mentioned, I'd rather walk. I cannot take a motorbike, a trike, that you see me using throughout here as I'm planning my routes. You're going to be planning your routes a lot too. If you don't plan your routes, you're going to end up getting taken a completely wrong fucking direction. You're going to screw yourself over, especially if you don't have the batteries and things that you have to operate the vehicles and things you use. If you hit the smallest rock, as I mentioned earlier, you will get knocked away off the bike and take damage to it. And especially when you're going through some of these factory areas, when you're going through distribution areas, there's these little boundaries that you can't cross, as you see here. This is super fucking annoying. You can't even do an easy thing to jump over to save yourself some time. And if you try to cut across, there'll be some invisible boundaries that will hit, and you can't get across to save time, so it makes it very confusing as far as where you want to go to sometimes, especially if you just get impatient, and you will get impatient because you're doing a lot of stuff going from A to B, traversing all the time. You're just going to get sick of it at one point, and you're going to want to throw the controller, but you cannot cut corners. As soon as you cut corners, you'll be killed, and you'll have to get all of your stuff and restart it over, and all of your progress restarted over. You have to get your boots back on because you don't have your boots. And then your feet are going to hurt, you're going to bleed, you're going to lose energy. If you don't have container repair spray with you, if you forget to press the square button to point the repair spray backwards, if you use the repair spray that's in the elements instead of hiding from the elements before you use it, everything is going to be ineffective, and you're just going to be wasting your time. You have to take this game at a snail's pace. And the biggest problem I have with this game, and one of these things that I can mention safely, is just when you think the game is going to be fun, it's going to turn around, go back to a snail's pace, and say fuck you, and make you start all over again and do some of these things. So it's really frustrating. So, as I talked about, in this like system, I want to mention this again very quickly. It's Dark Souls without the player invasion. Now, this part of the game in the like system I thought was one of the very few things that was truly rewarding. But it was brought to my attention as we talked to, I've seen video game hot takes from, Shane Rerez as he's starting to do another part of his channel, Shane Luis, doing Rerez and some of those other things like that. He talked about it, and I thought that this was a very good point, and I didn't think about this throughout this initial review and doing all of that. What happens to these structures? What happens to everything else when they break down, and once this game is beaten, people stop going back to it and people stop playing in it? Is the structures and everything else going to stay, depending on the chapter that you're in, depending on the weather? If it hasn't hit it, there's not going to be degradation. But if players stop playing, are you going to be able to have as much help? Is it going to be like playing this game in offline mode where you have to build all of your structures on your own and deal with all of that upkeep? What kind of experience did the early embargo reviewers have reviewing this game, as there wasn't as many people on playing it to build structures and build that camaraderie and give a like, being able to save someone's ass as you help them cross a bridge or build a generator or give them a safe house for them to be able to sleep in, be able to go through a share locker, donate materials, donate cargo, so that you never feel like when you're going from place to place you're going to be stuck doing, you'll always have something on your back to carry to get some extra likes. What the likes are basically used for is to be able to build up points in your character, to be able to have Sam, not fall over as easily, or be able to carry more equipment, or be able to manufacture materials you need to build things. The like's very important. If you help out other players, in turn, it'll help out you. But again, what will happen when people stop playing this game? Will all those structures be there, or will it be taken away, or is it tied to a chapter system? I thought that was a very interesting point. So, there's a few controversies that I want to save for this game. I could have talked about it at the very beginning of the video, but I want to get to it now and talk about it. The controversy and the polarizing reviews for Death Stranding. Oh, here's one example of a review. I give this game a 9 out of 10, but the gameplay is boring and it's just not that fun to play. Does that sound like a 9 out of 10 to you? The gameplay is boring, it's foreign to me, and it's just not that fun to play, and the cycle is a slow burn. You have to get yourself in the right mind to be able to play this game. Does that really sound like a 9 out of 10? I don't believe that. I even heard one of the reviewers talk about, as you see some of this stuff on Metacritic, they gave this game a 4 out of 10 and said maybe Konami was the ones that saved Kojima from making a game like this. And I shuddered to think about that. Even before I played this game, I was like, man, that can't be fucking true. If that really is true, then, maybe Kojima, this will be the one and done as far as making a bad game, because this, in all instances, is a bad game. I can't recommend it. It's not going to be for everyone. Maybe some people will like the slow burn of going from A to B and just delivering packages, because that's basically what you're going to be doing. All of the sequences that are broken up, whether it would be boss fight or some of the other stuff that you saw me shooting, whether it would be incarnations or BTs, it's quite short, and the gameplay is incredibly easy as far as the fighting is. It's not epic boss fights that Metal Gear Solid had brought in there. You're not shooting down Hind Ds. You're not running naked doing sword fights with Solidus Snake. You're not going against Psycho Mantis as he says, "You like Castlevania, don't you? I'm going to shake your controller." You don't plug the controller into a controller port B or 2 to get away from Psycho Mantis, or go through, Otacon and the heartbreak of Sniper Wolf. You don't do any of that stuff. You don't take on Vulcan Raven in a tank. You're pretty much, trying to run from BTs, or if you do get a chance to fight a big one, you use your blood and your piss and shit to shoot at it until it dies, and there's not really much of a challenge. So even the action sequences in this game are not that good. So, the editor-in-chief of Famitsu, was it Hinasuka Hakamura, something like that? He is the editor-in-chief of Famitsu. So him and the mascot of this magazine have in Famitsu a cameo appearance in Death Stranding. What makes it interesting, a 40 was a perfect score from the Famitsu magazine and the stuff that for Death Stranding. They gave Death Stranding a perfect score. They also gave 2 other games from Hideo Kojima a perfect score. Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker and Metal Gear Solid 4. That makes you wonder when 3 of Kojima's games get a perfect score, and some of the other games that had a perfect score were games that were also featured with the editor-in-chief of Famitsu in the magazine in mind. That's got to be controversial. It's got to be controversial also in these Game of the Year awards that will be coming up, that Death Stranding is given 8 different nominations, whether it be sound design or voice acting. Voice acting, I can definitely see that. But you can't say gameplay. You can't say action-adventure experiences. This is not a fucking experience that's going to allow you to have much fun. So how can you nominate it for a Game of the Year in those regards? I could see, voice acting and things like that. Maybe even story. I'm not going to be jaded enough to say the story isn't good. I'm not going to give the story a perfect 10 out of 10, but I could give it at least at worst an 8.5. I think the story is pretty good. I think there are some twists and turns. I do think at the very end of the game, in the latter chapters, that Kojima and everyone else attempts to tie in the story to make it make the most sense as possible, and I think they do a pretty decent job, all things considered. But I can't even give the story a 10 out of 10. So to have that be one of the aspects that is considered for Game of the Year, I get it, but you can't do it on a gameplay aspect. That just doesn't make any damn sense. And as I mentioned, I want to talk about some of this stuff even from the Review Tech USA channel with Rich and all those guys in there. He talked about it as far as Kojima. He thought about Kojima thought himself that some of this stuff was whining. He said he was a little upset that this game wasn't getting more 10 out of 10s, more perfect scores. He thought the United States, the Western audience, didn't understand the type of game that he was trying to make. And Kojima even made the mention, although some people say that some of the other things were taken out of context, but this was not. He made the mention that, that most of the top games in the Western audiences are first-person shooters. Look at Metacritic. Go on Metacritic right now for the top PlayStation 4 games and some of the other consoles that are in there. And we'll do this together. I'll do this for you right now. This is just PlayStation 4 games on Metacritic, and maybe some of the inclusion of them are multi-platform. You tell me if they are first-person shooters. Number 1, Red Dead Redemption 2. We'll keep going down the list. That got a 97. Grand Theft Auto 5, Last of Us Remastered, God of War, Persona 5, Metal Gear Solid 5 The Phantom Pain, that was one of Kojima's games, Uncharted 4, Thief's End, Journey, Bloodborne, Undertale, Witcher 3, The Wild Hunt, Divinity Original Sin 2 Definitive Edition, Final Fantasy XIV Shadowbringers, Shadow of the Colossus, Witcher 3 Hunt, that was added in, Celeste, Inside, Nier Automata, Resident Evil 2, Flower, Diablo 3 Ultimate Evil Edition, Overwatch finally would be considered a first-person shooter, I believe. That is number 22 on the list. So I gave you 21 games before that were not first-person shooters. And Kojima had said that because of first-person shooters, the Western audiences do not understand the type of game that he's trying to make, and that's the reason why the scores were what they were. And to be honest with you, given the scores that are there considering, I wonder how many of them are actually the scores they are because Kojima is the director. Would Death Stranding still be averaging like an 84 on Metacritic if Kojima was not the game designer? I don't think so. Let's say EA comes out and makes this game. And I know I give EA a lot of shit, just like NBA 2K, as far as, EA and Madden 20 and 2K20, the casino gambling, all that stuff I talked about before. If EA made this game, if EA made Death Stranding, do you really think it'd be getting an 84 on Metacritic? I don't believe so. I think some of these guys are lying to themselves. And I think some of these guys do not want to tell you the truth as far as the game is concerned about what it really is. And it's a shame. And I hate to say it to you, if you're hard of hearing or you don't want to believe this, Hideo Kojima has made a bad game in Death Stranding. Yes, I say it's good for him to have his own money, to have the AAA title, to be able to make the title that he wants. And yes, I do believe this game would have been better suited as a movie, but as a game, this game wholeheartedly fails. If I give you a score right now, as I'm closing this review, if I give you a score, I cannot give gameplay higher than a 0. If gameplay is a 0, and voice acting and everything else and story is a 10 out of 10, that still gives you an average of 5 out of 10. And if I say at best, as I mentioned, that I give the voice acting and story 8.5, and I give it a 0, this leaves you somewhere in the 4 range at best. That's all Death Stranding is. The gameplay is non-existent. The story might be good, and I do say, again, if you can get through the first 20 hours of the game, if you can accept, and I don't believe a game should do this as I mentioned, but if you can accept that the game is a slow burn, and it's going to be boring and monotonous, and you're going to spend 90% of your time going from point A to point B, and you can get through the first 20 hours, if you can get through the first 20 hours, you can finish Death Stranding. But that's all up to you. And if that's what you believe a game should be, then God help us going forward as these systems in PS5 and Xbox Scarlet get more hyper-realistic. If we get more into the Oculus Rift, if we get more into the virtual reality and we get less gameplay, then God help us all. Because I think we would be going down a bad path. Because if this is the best that we can do as far as a walking simulator, and it probably will be for the next 10 years, because Kojima, if you want to put it that way, has made the best walking simulator on the planet, but it's still an awful game in whole. If any other company tries to do this, I shudder to think what we're going to see. So as I make a mention of the story, the ending thoughts, the inventory system, and throughout the parts of the game, there are elements of it that when you think this game can be fun, all of a sudden it turns out to be nothing. But if you can get through it, if you can get through some of the ending thoughts, I think this game is a little bit easier to understand than some of the Metal Gear Solid camaraderie and all of that. I think there are instances of this game that you can enjoy, but in a pure gameplay empirical standpoint, it falls short. And as I mentioned, Chapter 4 and some of the stuff that gets repeated, that's the first time you get some of the gameplay aspects as far as handguns, assault rifles, and grenades. I'm not kidding you. Chapter 4, when you first get introduced to the action and everything else, I beat it in 15 minutes. And then I went back to delivering packages again. And I said, what the shit? I finally got into an action sequence that I had fun. I felt like a game. I was getting something there. But if you're expecting, Metal Gear Solid boss fights, if you're expecting all of that stuff, you're just not going to find it here. What you see is what you get. You're going from point A to point B. And if you can enjoy that, then I guess you are a better man than I, because I have gone through the 65 hours to complete this game, and as far as replayability, that may be another one of those things that people always talk about that makes a game great. I believe, instead of putting moderately low, I would quantify Death Stranding's replayability as absolutely butt-kiss. None. This is going to be John signing off for the Death Stranding review for an exclusive on PS4. I don't believe this is going to be exclusive for long. It's going to be on more systems. What did you think about all this stuff we talked about today, and what did you think about the game? Whether you agree or disagree or tell me to go fuck myself, let me know in the comments below. Really appreciate it. Have a good one, guys.